Good afternoon and welcome to the House Higher Education Budget Committee meeting. Order of business today, we'll have a presentation about the recent performance audit about DEI and foreign income at state universities, followed by budget recommendations for Fort Hays State University, Pittsburgh State, and University of Kansas. Before we begin, I just want to see if there's any other members appearing online. Nicholas, is there anybody on WebEx? Nope. Looks like we're all here. All right, so first I'd like to welcome to the committee from the Legislative Post-Audit team, Ms. Zimmerman. Heidi, welcome to the committee.
Good afternoon. I am Heidi Zimmerman. I'm a principal auditor at Legislative Post-Audit, and I am here today to present the DEI and foreign contribution audit that we released just last week. Representative Howe was the requester for that audit. And so it is a two-question audit. The questions are on page 2. The first question pertains to DEI. That question was, how much state funding did each state university report spending on diversity-related departments and staffing in the most recent year? So the very short answer to that question is in the 22-23 school year, the 6 state universities reported spending a total of about $9 million in state funding for DEI-related staffing, training, and other services. So for a much longer answer, first of all, neither state law nor the Kansas Board of Regents provides a definition of what activities should be considered DEI-related. Additionally, neither one requires nor prohibits any specific type of DEI activity or spending. So further, the 6 state universities did not have a single shared definition of what DEI activities are. However, their various views did have some common themes. So some university officials told us that DEI activities are activities that improve access to higher education for all students. Others told us that DEI activities create a university culture that values differences and belonging. And a couple told us that DEI activities help students live and work in a diverse world. So we talked to officials from each university about the types of DEI-related services they provide. We asked them to report the services they thought were DEI-related at their university. Officials reported a wide variety of services, including things like food pantries, support groups so that students can meet other students with similar backgrounds or challenges, outreach programs that connect university leaders to traditionally underrepresented student groups, and tutoring. So many DEI services and activities the universities reported are not targeted to a specific group of students. Most of the universities told us that many services are open to all students. However, universities did report some programs that serve specific student groups. So, for example, many universities reported providing services related to military and veteran students and first-generation college students. To determine how much money universities spent, we collected expenditure data from each university. So to collect consistent data across all 6 universities, we asked them to provide expenditures related to any activity or service the university provides to support students who may not have the same opportunities to succeed as other students. So we asked the universities to report the personnel, training, and other expenditures that they thought met that definition for the 23 school year. So because there is no standard definition of DEI and there's no reporting or accounting requirements related to it, our ability to detect incorrect or missing information is limited. We did conduct basic data reliability checks. Nevertheless, you should be aware that the accuracy of the information is dependent on whether the universities reported completely and accurately to us. Additionally, we cannot ensure complete consistency across the universities because they do not all think of DEI in exactly the same ways. So the results of our data collection are on page 6. So in the 22-23 school year, the 6 universities reported spending a total of about $45 million on DEI-related activities. And the figure on the bottom of page 6 shows the total amount of DEI-related expenditures that each university reported. So within that $45 million, there was salary and benefits for 510 full-time equivalent DEI-related positions. It also included costs related to 202 DEI-related trainings for topics such as sexual harassment, anti-bias, and disability inclusion. Last, it included other costs such as scholarships, workshops, and events for high school students. Overall, the total reported DEI spending, that $45 million, accounted for about 2% of the university's total expenditures in the 23 school year. Additionally, out of the $45 million the universities spent on DEI-related activities, they reported spending about $9 million with state funds. So for the $9 million spent with state funds, salary and benefits accounted for 97% of that. Some of the reported staff included administrative staff, such as administrative assistants, directors of various offices, support staff, such as mental health counselors and international student advisors, and student employees, such as graduate teaching assistants and interns. Not all of the DEI-related staff are paid 100% with state funds. In many cases, only a portion of the total salary and benefit amount is paid with state funding. Further, not all DEI-related staff spend 100% of their time on DEI-related activities. Often, only a portion of a person's time is related to DEI. Other DEI services accounted for about 2.5% of the $9 million, it's about $221,000. These expenditures included activities such as outreach programs to high school students, transportation services, and software to improve the accessibility for students with disabilities. Just like with personnel, many of these expenditures are only paid in part with state funding. Universities also reported spending the remaining 0.6%, it's about $55,000, of their state-funded DEI expenditures on DEI-related training. Training paid with state and funding included diversity seminars, cultural competency training, and social justice training for advisors. Universities reported holding 19 different types of DEI-related training in the 23 school year that were paid at least in part with state funding. 5 of the 19 trainings were mandatory for at least some students, faculty, or staff. Additionally, we found that the universities do not have consistent measures for determining whether DEI-related activities are effective for achieving their DEI-related goals. Most universities told us their goals for DEI-related activities were to recruit and retain students. All of the universities reported collecting various types of data. The universities then report information such as enrollment and demographics to the Kansas Board of Regents. And this allows the universities to compare various metrics over time and across the universities. However, currently, the universities cannot directly connect those results to any specific DEI-related activity or spending. Next, I'm going to move on to question 2. Question 2 has to do with foreign income. So that question was, how much in foreign contributions and contracts from foreign countries did each university report receiving in the most recent year? So again, the very short answer is the 6 state universities reported receiving about $116 million from foreign sources in the 23 school year. For some details, first of all, federal and state law allow universities to receive money from foreign sources. The federal law defines a foreign source as a foreign government, an individual who is not a U.S. citizen or a U.S. national, a legal entity, such as a business that's created under the laws of a foreign country, and an agent acting on behalf of a foreign source. So we asked all 6 state universities to report to us all contributions they received from a foreign source in the 23 school year. Again, we performed basic data reliability checks on the data that the universities reported to look for accuracy and completeness. Nevertheless, we are reliant on what the universities reported to us. If a university did not report completely, we have a limited ability to detect it. So the total amount of money universities reported receiving from foreign sources in the 23 school year was about $116 million. Figure 2, which is on page 12, shows the total amount each university reported receiving from foreign sources. So as you can see, the total amounts ranged from about $42 million at KU to about $3 million at Emporia State. Nearly all of the money universities reported receiving from foreign sources was for tuition and fees. 96% was for tuition and fees. This included the tuition paid for by individual foreign students, Also included foreign universities or foreign governments that paid on behalf of a student. 4%, about $5 million, was for contracts. This included contracts for Kansas universities to perform a variety of activities, such as aircraft safety assessments, medical research, and animal vaccine research. And then 0.1%, about $113,000, was from gifts. That included gifts for the university to use for research, scholarships, or to assist students who may not have access to financial aid. The $116 million in contributions from foreign sources made up about 4% of the university's nearly $3 billion in total revenues for the 23 school year. Last, we also looked at where that money came from. So universities reported receiving money from 170 different countries. In total, half of the $116 million was from just 2 countries, China and India. We also looked at which countries contributed the most money by contribution type. So India and China contributed the most tuition and fees. Those 2 countries alone represented 53% of all tuition and fees. The remainder came from 166 other countries. The United Kingdom and Switzerland paid the most in terms of contracts. Those 2 countries represented about a third of all the money paid through with contracts. The remainder came from 37 other countries. And then Canada and Sweden contributed the most gifts. Those 2 countries represented about 2/3 of all the gifts. The remainder came from 27 other countries. We did not make any recommendations in this audit, and that does conclude my presentation. I'd be happy to stand for any questions.
Thank you, Heidi. I appreciate the LPA's and your team's work on the audit and providing us with additional information. I will open it up to any questions by members of the committee. You have questions for Heidi? Representative Smith.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Heidi, thank you. You mentioned scholarship money that came from foreign countries. Say it came from China. Was it scholarship money for the Chinese students that were on campus? Was it just a general scholarship?
Most of the scholarships came through gifts. I don't know exactly what countries they came from, but they tended to be for the university to use for the students at that university.
Thank you. Thank you.
I guess as a follow-up to that question, did the universities provide you with a head count per country? For example, like India, 36 million in tuition and fees. Did they present you any information about how many students that represented?
We didn't request that information from the universities. We stayed focused on the money side of it because that was the question.
Okay, thank you. Other questions from the committee? Representative Rogers.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So if I'm reading this correctly, and the questions that were asked were pretty broad. So graduate assistants, foreign graduate assistants, or professors that, I guess I'm trying to figure out if you have English as a second language, in a sense, those type of classes, those were thrown into as far as DEI, right?
We asked the universities to provide us information based on a particular definition, and if a university felt that that fell under the umbrella of DEI, then they would have reported it to us. However, we tried to stay out of the classroom. And so if a teacher or professor, if all of their kind of DEI related activities are in the classroom, well, we didn't capture that. But if they have additional DEI related activities, say they sat on a committee, that we do have. That would be in that personnel count. But we don't have, we stayed out of the classroom though.
Mr. Chairman, and I'm assuming also this is just the universities, the 6 universities didn't go into the athletic corps, those big, the 3 that have, athletic corporations, we've heard that maybe some of those may require other training that others don't, but this is simply from the institutions and not any ancillary. Is that correct?
This is all 6 state universities. This does not include KU Med Center, and it doesn't include Washburn. But we did see trainings that were related to athletes. So in a couple of cases, we saw where only athletes were required to undergo a specific training, usually having to do with Title IX. So we did see athletes in there, and I think that money would be here as well, as long as it's related to the 6 universities.
Thank you. Other questions from members of the committee? I'll ask one. In terms of the makeup of our universities and how people identify in terms of ethnicities or their race, was there any data provided to the legislative post audit about whether or kind of a baseline or maybe a look back about whether or not the universities are increasing the diversity on campus?
We did not look at that. It's just that would be a little bit out of the scope of the audit, but the universities do report that sort of information to the Kansas Board of Regents, and the Board of Regents does have a dashboard, and the universities do see that information, and they're tracking that information, but we didn't request it.
Okay, thank you for that. Appreciate that. If there's no further questions from members of the committee, I'd just like to thank Heidi and the audit team for your work. And I think it led to some more questions and more interest about how our universities work and operate and the students they serve. So thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, with that being said, we're going to move on to budget recommendations. And I'm going to start off with Pittsburgh State University. Like to go with them first. And I would ask if Brianna, if you could do a little bit of I don't know if you could do just a review of kind of where we're at and where we're going in terms of the budget, in terms of kind of the first meeting we had in which perhaps I could do the update. Okay, sorry. So the first meeting we had, we did have some conversation with KLRD about the motion, the first motion, in which we separated out some of those pass-through dollars from KBOR's budget to the universities. So a lot of those enhancement requests and pass-through monies that have gone through KBOR in recent years, many of those were deleted out and to be reconsidered under each university's budget. So that's kind of where we're at. So we're going to start with Pittsburgh State University. For them, I believe there was only one deletion, and that would have been for the $2 million for the reading improvement facility there at Pittsburgh State. So with that being said, I'll open it up for members of the committee if you guys have anything for Pittsburgh State University. Representative Smith.
Thanks, Mr. Chair. Mr. Chair, I have an amendment.
Okay. Do you have that to pass up? Okay. We'll get that distributed, but if you'd like to explain your amendment as that's being shared. Thank you.
Give everybody a chance to look at it. Deals with our 3 regional schools. I make a motion to add $9 million out of the state general fund for the regional stabilization fund for fiscal year 2025. This $9.9 million from the state general fund will be divided equally amongst the 3 regional schools, with each school receiving $3 million from the state general fund in their operating accounts. As far as Pittsburgh, this will help keep their tuition low. It'll be used for infrastructure, and it'll help the workforce in that area. So thank you for your consideration, Mr. Chair.
Is there a second on the motion? It's been seconded by Representative Woodard. So is there discussion on the motion? And this does impact more than just Pittsburgh State University as well. So Representative Fairchild.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. There's a pretty significant cost to this amendment. And like I mentioned before, if we want to stay anywhere close to the governor's recommendations, I mean, I don't know what the math is now, but I think we're already over her recommendations. I think this is going to put us pretty far over, and you know, we could end up with a situation like we had last year where they come back and tell us to take spending out of the budget to get closer to her recommendations. And so that's going to continue to be my point with all these amendments. If we're not going to try to cut anything else out, we're going to be way over the governor's recommendations with these types of amendments.
Next question or comment, Vice Chair Sanders or Representative Woodard. Yep.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I was just going to ask, or maybe state that because we deleted all of this out of the Board of Regents budget, I don't think we've exceeded what we deleted yet. I'm getting a head nod from Brianna. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
I will note that this regional stabilization fund, as I understood it going into the session, that it was the #1 request by the 3 regional universities as a kind of a collective effort, but it was not included in the governor's budget recommendation. I'll go to Vice Chair Sanders.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So my question would be, why don't each of the universities come individually? And do they truly all need 3 million apiece, or do some need more? Could some get by with less? Why are the 3 bundled together?
Representative Vice Chair Sanders is the question for Representative Smith. Okay, Representative Smith.
Thank you. Thank you for the question. I was asked if I wanted to ask this just for Pittsburgh State, and I commented I'd rather do it for all 3 schools because I think all 3 schools are in the same situation. So I didn't want to just ask it for Pittsburgh. I wanted to ask it for Emporia, and I wanted to ask it for Hayes, and not just limit to Pittsburgh State. That was my reasoning. Thank you.
Representative Rogers.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Committee, you know, we have, you were on this committee last year, and we heard, you know, we made some investments last year, and especially in our regional universities, they've done a good job being stewards of the money. They were asked to come with a regional request because sometimes we get so focused on, in a sense, as you might want to call it, the big 3 and some of their big ticketed items that, as we heard even this year, some presentations saying, hey, we've done our part, but we feel we're not being rewarded. I'm not sure if that's the right word to use or not. That I don't necessarily like that word. But those that have followed along, that this is a way, I think, that if this were to pass, some of the, you know, there's still other things that are there for long-term commitments. But what this does is this also shows, I think, a good faith effort to the state that those regionals are doing the right thing and are moving forward. And again, absolutely. Now, all 3 of them can make a case, and all 3 of them have come before this committee asking for, you know, kind of individual things might work. If this fails, then that's the road we'll go down as well. I think what this does is this kind of raises the tide for the 3 regionals. They all have unique situations that they bring, and they have all worked very hard over the last several years to try to meet the needs of their areas. And so, while I appreciate the comments from you know, from the colleague from Stafford who is concerned about the dollar amounts, absolutely. But I think, you know, in all the investments we can make, education is one that higher education is one in all these that I think is still a good investment to make. And, you know, what is somebody's foil is somebody's golden ticket, if you will. And so that's kind of where we are. But I appreciate the maker of the motion. And I would support this as not only as a good faith gesture to the regionals and to say, the onus is on you to make good investments with that dollar. I think like we saw with our technical schools, with the investment we made with them last year, they came back this year and to show how they have used that to move forward. So, Mr. Chairman, thank you.
Go to Vice Chair Sanders and Representative Fairchild.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, or Mr. Chairman. So it's not that I don't think they ought to have the money. Maybe they should, maybe they shouldn't. I just think that the university should come and make an individual case. I just find it hard to believe that they each need exactly $3 million apiece. Maybe they all need a little more. Maybe they could all get by with a little less. I just don't I don't think, for example, that we would entertain the motion that would give a set amount to KU, K-State, and Wichita State, and then divide it by 3. I just don't think that's prudent. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Vice Chair Sanders. Go to Representative Fairchild.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. When we were discussing the Board of Regents budget and we were passing that out, I specifically remember that we passed out that we were going to go with the governor's recommendations with the exception of the things that we took out. And those were amendments that I introduced that passed. But with the exception of those amendments that I introduced that got passed, we passed the governor's recommendation. And then we also added some enhancements for the community colleges, for the technical colleges and so forth. And so I don't see any way that we would be under the governor's total recommendations right now.
So when we consider each of the institutions, I mean, I guess everything's still fair game. And if someone wants to bring an amendment to add back for X, Y, or Z, they have that opportunity to do it in this committee or not. And so I don't know if that answers your question, but when we did the KBOR budget, we were just basically taking out of KBOR's budget those enhancement requests, and I think it was over $160 million in different line items or funding.
Well, my comment was simply in response to, are we allowed to say names in this committee or not? The representative that's sitting to your right is in response to his the ranking minority member is in response to his comment that he thought that we were below the governor's recommendations, and I disagreed with his comment based on what we've already done. I think we're ahead of her recommendation.
Representative Woodard.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Item number 3 of the budget subcommittee report was delete 142.6 million SGF from the Kansas Board of Regents. So when we adopted that, we adopted it as amended by this committee.
Well, what we deleted is most likely going to be added back in college by college.
That is certainly a relevant point as well. We're just trying to, that was kind of a formatting issue. Appropriations wanted to see, when we brought, say, University of Kansas Medical Center, when I report that out to Approps tomorrow, that it would contain everything as much as we can under that budget for the medical center. So, Representative Woodard.
Mr. Chair, I am going to support this motion, but I do, if I get the honor of being here again next year, I do want to just make it clear to all of us that I want to support our regional institutions, but this is multiple years where we are supporting the institutions that are declining in enrollment and not supporting those that are increasing. I just want that to be out there. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Representative Smith.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. One of the former representative said we could send it out to appropriations and they could send it back to us. And to me, I can live with that. If they send it back and they want us to do something with it, that's fine. But I think these colleges do need it. I think it'd be a plus, and I appreciate the previous comments from the ranking minority. Thank you.
Is there further discussion from members of the committee? Representative Rajas.
Mr. Chairman, not to get chippy, but if we want to go down this path, then every year we can get down to the Nats numbers, and then if an institution is down, if it's one of the big ones, if it's the flagship, and start. I mean, I get that, but I think they play a role. Every one of them plays a role, whether it's a big role or a little role. I mean, we have 437 institutions in Canton, not quite, but we have a number of institutions, public and private, in Kansas. And, I think, the committee can do what it wants. And I appreciate those comments. And, what we're trying this year is something we haven't in the past is to go through, especially, our big three, if you will, and really get into those. And this one is one that when the regionals came to us, they had their own individual requests, and so I think what this one is one that is some. I mean, yes, I think they could all make their case for more or possibly less. I don't know whoever would want less money if you're giving it out, but the situation is, I think. The onus is on them though as well. I mean, if enrollment or whatever that they're not showing a positive direction, I think that starts with this committee as we move forward, and I think all the CEOs realize that they're all under that gun, and so that's where we are, and we're down in a long process ahead. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Any further discussion on the motion to add Vice Chair Sanders?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. To give an example of my point, there was one university, and I don't remember which one, but I mean, we could look it up, that didn't have any dollars for demolition because they didn't need any dollars. They don't demolish their buildings. Where I think all the other universities had money in there for demolition. So I just think we get more accountability if the schools come and make their own individual requests. Now, Representative Smith, did you say that this came from Pittsburgh and then you added the other two?
It was asked of me if it would come from Pittsburgh, but I said I would rather do all three regionals.
Oh, okay. Did they specifically ask for $3 million?
Yes, I'd have to say yes.
Okay. So then you added the other two in, which I get what you're doing, but that's with no knowledge of what they may or may not need. Is that correct?
Representative Vice Chair Sanders, if I may interject a little bit here. So this was of the three regional universities, this was their request to the governor, and it was ranked their number one request. The governor did not include that in her budget recommendation. And so that was through KBOR, that was part of the unified system-wide request to the governor, was the $3 million per institution. Yeah, so that was established. Yeah, so they requested that of KBOR, then KBOR submitted that agency request to the governor's office. So,
again, I don't mean to be chippy either. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Representative Rajas.
Right, and I'm sorry, Mr. Chairman, I don't want to belabor the fact, but the regionals were asked as they were coming up with their budget request because of past maybe failures or past having to go under the umbrella of the regions deciding, which ones would be presented individually. I mean, individually as a whole, if you understand what I'm saying. And so the three CEOs of the regional schools got together and say, okay, here's what we can come up with, and we can do a deeper dive into what that all means. But each of them have their own plan on how to use that and invest that money in programs and other things at the university. And so that's where, much like we do with the dollar amounts, there's a formula, and it may not be down to equal, but even the big schools get in a sense almost the same amount, if you will, based on those factors.
So I'll just make a general comment as chair. I don't have a strong opinion one way or the other on this specific motion. I do think the regionals do great work as part of our higher education system in Kansas, but I don't have a strong opinion about whether $9 million is the right amount or not. I do know, and just to remind the committee, that we have other requests by each institution as well. So just to make sure you keep that into account as we kind of move forward. But is there any other discussion on this motion to add 9 million SGF to the Regional Stabilization Fund for fiscal year 25? If not, we'll proceed to vote on, or actually, I'll let Representative Smith close on your motion. Representative Smith.
Thanks, Mr. Chair. I close.
Thank you, Representative Smith. All in favor of adding the 9 million SGF to the Regional Stabilization Fund for the three regional institutions, please signify by saying aye. All opposed, nay. It appears the ayes have it. The ayes do have it. Motion carries. Are there any other items for Pittsburgh State University for consideration? Is there any other discussion or questions about Pittsburgh State University's proposed budget? Seeing no further discussion on Pittsburgh State University's budget for fiscal year 24 and fiscal year 25, what is the will of the committee? Representative Woodard.
Chair, I move that we pass the Pittsburgh State University budgets for fiscal year 24 and 25 as amended.
It's been moved and seconded by Representative Amix to approve Pittsburgh State University's budget for fiscal year 24 and 25 as amended. Is there any discussion? If not, we'll proceed to vote. All in favor say aye. All opposed, nay. Motion carries. Next, we'll go to Fort Hays State University's budget. Are there any items for discussion for Fort Hays State University? Representative Rajas.
Mr. Chairman, thank you. The governor's budget did have a couple of things for Fort Hays, and I would like to have them in two separate requests and to add those back in. Workforce development, of course, is so important, and Fort Hays has done a great job with their nursing program with 100% placement and always doing well on their boards. They've outgrown their facility, and the governor did put in $15 million for the facility for the Western Kansas Nursing Workforce Development Center. And so what my motion, Mr. Chairman, is to add the $15 million for this facility into the Fort Hays budget, along with add $400,000 to their operating budget for operations of the center.
been seconded by Representative Wassinger. Is there discussion on the motion? Yeah, Representative Amix.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Question of the representative.
Yes.
400,000 you said was for operation cost.
Yes,
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
for the center, yes.
Representative Fairchild.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. My question would just be, wouldn't it be simpler just to move that we go with the governor's recommendations for Fort Hays State?
Representative Rogers.
Fine with me. Mr. Chairman, I will amend my motion.
So,
Can I do that?
well, let's discuss what the motion on the table. So the motion on the table is to add back in what was in the governor's budget rec for the Western Kansas nursing workforce development for operating in the facility expansion for 15.4 million. Is that correct?
Well, the facility is one thing, and then the operations, yes.
Yeah. So the total amount is, well, for the facility, it's 15 million.
400,000 in their operating budget for operations.
For fiscal year 2025.
Well, the operations would be in their budget, yearly budget.
Recurring
Yes.
for the 400,000. Okay. So that was a comment, correct? Representative Fairchild.
Well, unless somebody has an amendment that for an enhancement beyond the governor's recommendation, I was just wondering why the wording of it isn't just to accept the governor's recommendations for Fort Hays State. That was my comment or question.
Is there any other comments or responses? Vice Chair Sanders.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So, Representative, just for clarification, this was the building that was talked about being downtown.
No, that's was Wichita State and KU. This is one on the campus of Fort Hays.
Okay.
Yes.
All right. Thank you.
Yes.
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Representative Woodard.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. It's my understanding that this committee deleted this enhancement from the Board of Regents request, so it would take a vote of this committee to put it in Fort Hays budget. Is that correct?
That is my understanding. Yeah.
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Is there any other discussion on the motion? Seeing none, Representative Rogers, you may close on your motion.
Close.
It's been moved and seconded to add the 15 million for the facility expansion for the Western Kansas nursing workforce development and the 400,000 for the operating expenses. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
All opposed, nay. Motion carries. Are there any other items under consideration for Fort Hays State University? Representative Rogers.
Mr. Chairman, the governor also had included in her budget $250,000 for telehealth certification for mental health providers. I move that motion. I guess I can't move it until we have discussion, can I?
Representative Woodard seconds the motion for the telehealth certification for mental health providers for Fort Hays State University, 250,000 for fiscal year 2025. Discussion on the motion. Any discussion? No. Okay. The only discussion I would have is, so in the previous additions for the regional stabilization fund, there's 3 million. So each of the regionals is getting 3 million. Then you add, for Fort Hays State, 15.4. Then we would be adding another 250,000 to Fort Hays State. So Obviously, that's something you guys are aware of, but just something to keep in mind as we move forward.
Wichita State's budget coming up, we can always cut from there, right? I'm kidding. I just want to make sure. No.
You want your words spread across the
Oh,
journal?
no. My mic on? Wait.
Okay, very good. Well, seeing no further discussion, we'll proceed to vote on the motion for the $250,000 for the telehealth certification for Fort Hays State University. All in favor, say aye. All opposed, nay. Motion carries. Are there any other items for Fort Hays State University? Seeing none, what is the will of the committee, Vice Chair Sanders?
Mr. Chairman, I move that we pass the Fort Hays State University budget as amended
For which years, Representative?
for fiscal year 25
And 24?
and 24.
Okay, it's been moved and seconded by Representative Woodard to approve Fort Hays State University's budget for fiscal year 24 and 25 as amended. Is there any discussion? If not, we'll proceed to vote. All in favor, say aye. All opposed, nay. Motion carries. So next on the list is the University of Kansas. I'll give you a second to get out any materials you need to. So when we start the University of Kansas budget, I just wanted to highlight to the committee that I was made aware in the budget bill, there is no mention of appropriation that was made last year in last year's budget bill for fiscal year 25 for the Kansas Geological Survey. That was an $850,000 appropriation. It was a 2-year, basically a proviso that we added in our committee. One was a dollar amount for fiscal year 24, then one was for 25. So the question had arose, since it's not in this year's budget bill, is that money still there? And so I don't know if that question has been answered or not. Okay, so I did talk to the revisor, Joe Walters, this morning. We had a conversation, but I don't know if we had reached out to the director of the budget to make sure that that money is there, but I haven't heard back from him yet. So I just wanted to make note of that. We're trying to track down and confirm whether that money is still there somewhere. It didn't show up in this year's budget, and I'm not sure it would. If the revisor would have any information about that, because oftentimes we don't do 2-year request when we do provisos. So if you had any additional comment on that.
What it's in last year's bill. And so it would take action by the legislature to make that null and void. So the 850,000 for the geological survey, along with the proviso about the positions, about staff, it would be in there. And then the agency will get that money on July 1 of 24, just like any other. I mean, this is no different than any other agency who is in last year's budget bill that got a FY 25 appropriation.
Okay. I guess my question to KLRD is that $850,000 reflected in their operating budget somewhere? And you don't have to provide the answer right now, but it's something I wanted to try to track down to make sure it was part of that overall dollar amount for the Kansas Geological Survey. Are there any items for consideration for the University of Kansas? Seeing none. Representative Amex.
Question of you. So this $850,000 Wasn't that an ongoing request, a reoccurring amount of money?
I believe so.
And that's what we're trying to clear up.
Correct. We were just, I haven't done this a whole lot, so I guess you could say I'm inexperienced to a degree. And so we just wanted certainty, and I heard from University of Kansas, and didn't see anything in the budget for that 850,000, like a line item. And maybe it wouldn't show up that way. Maybe it's because it's recurring, although it hasn't occurred yet. So it would just start in fiscal year 25 for that dollar amount. So we're just trying to track down and make sure that indeed the intent of the legislature is in funding that is going to be there. Correct. Yeah, and I think it's the intent of this committee as well. So, yeah, turn it over to Joe Walters, reviser.
So for reference, it was in last year's House Bill 2184, Section 110 for the University of Kansas for fiscal year 2025. So that would be our reference point to look at that. And it has not, to my knowledge, it has not been made null and void anywhere. So on July 1st of 2024, this will happen.
Thank you for the clarification, and hopefully abating any fears out there that perhaps the money isn't there. So we just wanted to do our due diligence on that. So thank you, Jill, for looking into that. As you know, the University of Kansas, their number one request was the cancer research facility, which we've already added that appropriation back in the University of Kansas Medical Center. Are there any other items of concern or discussion for University of Kansas budget for fiscal year 24 or 25? Seeing none, what is the will of the committee? Vice Chair Sanders.
Representative Amix, I would defer to you if you'd like to make the motion.
Thank you. I would move that we concur with the governor's recommendation for the University of Kansas budget for 2024 and 2025.
It's been moved and seconded by Vice Chair Sanders to approve the University of Kansas budget recommendation for fiscal year 24 and 25. Is there discussion? If seeing none, we'll proceed to vote. All in favor, say aye. All opposed, nay. Motion carries. Committee, I guess we finished a little ahead of time. We do have a meeting tomorrow. We have the Emporia State University, Kansas State University, and Wichita State University. Tomorrow, I will be reporting out the Kansas Board of Regents budget recommendation, and you all should have received that by email. And if there's anything that you want me to impress upon appropriations regarding our recommendations, please visit with me individually, and I'll be glad to hear your thoughts and concerns moving forward. I do have a schedule to report these universities that we heard today and those recommendations starting next Monday and finishing on Tuesday. So that is kind of the timeline before appropriations starts working on the overall larger budget bill for fiscal year 24 and 25. Is there any announcements? Seeing none, I guess you guys get out early today, and we'll see you back tomorrow.